The last time I was on the podcast, my title was licensed master social worker. Now it's licensed clinical social worker. So I would have started off with a bachelor's in psychology upon moving to the US. And then from there, I did a master's in social work.
Is that like you working in a circus or something? What's going on there?
It's a type of circusy, gymnast-related kind of thing.
Hello, my name is Timon Thomas, co-founder of Global Ed Recruiting, and I am here today with Desarie Nicholas. She is the co-founder of KariCope. We've had a conversation in the past, and I thought that, you know what, why not do it twice? Because that conversation was very informative, and I'm happy to have in person with me today, Desarie Nicholas. Welcome, Desarie.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back on the podcast.
All right, thank you. And so you recently moved to Dallas?
Recently moved to Dallas, December of 2024.
That's cool. All right. So you're closer to where I am now, so we don't have to do it virtually as we did the first time. So that's great.
Yeah, this is a different feel. It's nice.
Yeah. So I kind of want to maybe set the stage a little because we've spoken in the past, but I do want to know, just who you are, because I think people who would not have seen you before have no idea as to what you do, who you are, and your educational journey, because we are speaking to international students specifically here. So can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and just give me a brief rundown of your educational journey?
Okay. So again, my name is Desarie Nicholas, and I'm the founder of KariCope Wellness. The last time I was on the podcast, my title was licensed master social worker. Now it's licensed clinical social worker.
Congratulations.
Thank you. A long year's journey to get there. So I would have started off with a bachelor's in psychology upon moving to the US. And then from there, I did a master's in social work, discovering social work through doing volunteer work. My supervisors were social workers when I interned at the National Eating Disorders Association. That's their headquarters is in New York City. So I did some volunteering there, working at a helpline where people would call in who were in distress for different reasons related to eating disorders. And I didn't know about social work, anything much about it, but my supervisors were. So that's how I discovered the profession of social work. I like the idea that I could do a master's and be able to do counseling right off the bat with that, because that's what I wanted to do when I chose psychology. But psychology would have meant doing a PhD or regardless a doctorate, and thinking about money and time and all that investment. I like the idea of a master's that would allow me to do that. And so that's how I ended up in social work.
Okay. As always, whenever you speak to me, I always find some bits of information so interesting. The first time around, I didn't think I knew that you worked at that particular crisis center where you helped people with eating disorders, you'd call it?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. So in terms of the way that you did your actual job, was it that you actually counseled people into understanding maybe why they are feeling the way that they did or stuff like that? Like, what exactly did you do then when you worked in that position?
So working as a volunteer there, so I was a college student at the time, they would have trained us to do motivational interviewing. And we got a lot of training around the stages of change, helping to identify when you're talking to a person, how to identify what stage of change they're in, meaning, are they ready for change? How ready are they? So we would have used motivational interviewing skills to help a person determine, why are they calling in the first place? What is making them want to seek help? And that would help us determine what kind of services they needed. So we would refer them to services, whether it be counseling if they didn't have a counselor, whether it was a psychiatrist, whether it was a treatment center. We would talk to them, help them to kind of regulate their emotions, and then give them referrals. So that was the process.
Okay. So you were doing some great work, I would imagine. You helped people and get them out of some really tricky situations.
Yeah, I was shocked that I could be doing that with a bachelor's. I didn't think I would have an opportunity to work with people directly like that. given that when I did the research into a bachelor's in psychology, it was like you have to do a doctorate if you want to work with people directly. So knowing that I can volunteer and gain those skills, that gave me a leg up into the master's program because I went into the master's program now having counseling skills already.
Oh, okay, okay. So when you made that switch, how difficult was it, or how easy, or how seamless was it when you switched from psychology? Obviously, you had some counseling experience, but knowing that you were going to switch over to social work, was there like an easy transition? Was it something that was a little more difficult? How was that?
For me, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was difficult. Because psychology is very wide, you could be doing research, a lot of research if you're doing a psychology degree. You could end up doing counseling. There's a lot that you can end up doing, but there's not much you can do with the bachelor's. So I didn't have an in-depth view really of what I could be doing, but with social work, it was very clear. The path was clear in terms of what I could be doing. And I had the choice between choosing to have my field of study either be organization management and leadership, clinical practice with individuals and families, and then we had community organizing. That was another, basically, it's like a major for the master's program. And I chose clinical practice with individuals and families. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't choose organization management and leadership, given that no, I do that.
Yeah, how does he?
But I really wanted to be a counselor. That was the basis of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to develop those skills, and I figured I knew I wanted to do something related to leadership and organizations, but I felt like I could gain those skills outside of a degree program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, interesting. So, to switch gears a little, the last time we spoke, you talked about students who might be thinking about doing psychology and knowing the, I don't necessarily want to call it challenges per se, but let's say opportunities that are available versus if you were to do other degrees or other majors that have similar scope in terms of helping people and stuff like that. You talked about neuroscience as an option for students. So I found it very interesting that, well, as I told you back then, I had no idea that that particular degree existed. And since then, I actually met someone who did that degree, and I felt a little more equipped to speak about it because I was like, you know what, I've heard about this before. So I would love if you could expand on that in terms of what exactly that type of degree entails, who you get to work with, and some of the job opportunities and places you can work with such a degree.
So with neuroscience, it's really studying the nervous system and how it functions. So it's a combination of biology, chemistry, physics, and different sciences that are coming together, but it really focuses on brain functioning and things like that. So a person would end up doing things like research, working in a research lab, working in a hospital, doing testing and imaging, driving science forward in terms of what we as counselors need to read in order to learn how to help our clients. Because people who are in neuroscience are often doing a lot of groundbreaking research to show how the brain functions, different ways to heal people. Because now we're finding talk therapy is not the only thing. There are different machines that are even being developed to help people relieve stress, sound waves, different things. So neuroscience gets into all of those kinds of things. But it's a STEM degree, so there's a lot of opportunity for it in terms of jobs because there's a lot of research and money behind it. And anything where you could do a lot of research, there's a lot of money behind it because it's science, so there's a lot of funding that's being pushed to drive brain sciences forward.
Okay, okay. And maybe a little aside here. So that's where the apps like Calm and these things like come from, and the idea that you can use songs and use certain types of energies and all of that type of stuff to maybe calm people from anxiety, and so that's where that comes from.
Exactly. So you even hear things now about the vagus nerve, which is something I did human and social biology. It was one of my favorite subjects in school. And I never heard anything about the vagus nerve. I know you hear things about vagus nerve stimulation and how that can help you sleep, and how it can help so many different things in terms of stress relief. And all of that comes out of neuroscience and the research that people are doing. So,
Okay, well, those are interesting stuff. Maybe I should start promoting that some more, because I think those are really interesting areas that people can go into and definitely help people. So I know that you've been doing some really important work recently. You have been doing some advocacy work. You have been working in different islands and stuff, and you've been working with organizations that are doing some advocacy work now. So, can you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing and what the impact of that type of work you think would have on greater society?
so it's almost a year now. I would say back in May of last year, I found something out about Grenada and a lot of other Caribbean countries that I didn't know, which is that suicide attempts are a crime on the law books. And that didn't make sense to me, being a mental health professional who understands that when someone is having suicidal thoughts, it means that they need your support and your help. They don't need to be punished. So to find out that that was a crime, I was shocked. It was a workshop that I went to that was organized by United for Global Mental Health. Also, an organization called Let's Unpack It was involved. PAHO, UNICEF. And they basically sensitized us to this issue and explained to us that these laws were adapted from colonial times, and they just were never changed. And so we were tasked with creating a coalition. And so, me being the representative from KariCope, we ended up now leading the charge to decriminalize suicide in Grenada, St. Lucia, Trinidad, and the Bahamas as well is involved. And so since then, we've had a consultation. We did a multi-stakeholder consultation in January of this year. And we brought in police. Ministry of Social Development was a big part of that as well. Ministry of Mental Health. We had Grenada Red Cross. We had people from different aspects of society, like religious bodies were present, different civil society organizations, youth. And we talked about how decriminalization can be a part of the suicide prevention efforts, because the research shows that when suicide is decriminalized, people are more likely to seek help, right? Because now they don't feel so much shame and stigma and fear around talking about the fact that they're dealing with these thoughts. And so it is a suicide prevention measure. And that's what we're working on now. And since then in Grenada, the Ministry of Social Development, the minister actually brought it up in Parliament. So we're very, very happy about that.
Okay. That's groundbreaking and pretty shocking, honestly. I never even knew that suicides were considered to be a crime. So maybe the next obvious question would be, well, how do you charge someone who commits suicide with a crime if they're successful? Is it a case where if they're not successful, they're going to be charged?
So it's usually in cases where a person attempts suicide and they survive. However, in Grenada, we're thankful that the law is not really enforced. So the police understands in Grenada that this is usually related to a mental health issue. A person needs support. They don't need to be thrown in jail or charged or anything. So in Grenada, the police would assist in trying to get the person some support. However, in other countries, people are prosecuted for it. And part of the problem with keeping it on the books is that the data around suicide is unclear in terms of what the suicide rates are for a country. So, for example, World Health Organization has a 0.6 per 100,000 as the suicide rate for Grenada. And that was for 2019. However, data from 2015 to 2020 from the police said it was 6 per 100,000. So there's a huge difference there in the data, right? So that means that as long as we have these things considered crimes, where the data is coming from is going to be all over the place, because some people may not take it to the police just because of fear of how it may be treated. And so that's a part of the issue. We want people to feel more comfortable speaking up. Okay. And that's what decriminalizing suicide is about.
Okay. So to wrap this bit of conversation up as it relates to your advocacy work, so what's the next step? So you advocate for a particular thing like this, then you get politicians and stakeholders discussing the issue. And then what is your next step? You're hoping for what? Change of laws? I mean, I guess there might be like a multitude of things that you're hoping for because you want society to accept that people who feel that particular way maybe just need help and need your support rather than, so kind of like destigmatizing the idea of, people taking their lives. But what's the ultimate goal for your organization?
The ultimate goal for us is for us to start having a community-oriented approach to responding to suicide. So for one, we want the media to learn how to talk about suicide. So, for example, an issue we have a lot in the Caribbean is when there's a suicide, we sensationalize it without realizing it. And that can be dangerous for viewers who could be dealing with the same thoughts, right? Because we talk about the method that the person used, and is that really relevant? Is that necessary information for people to have, right? So they talk about the methods, and, we talk about getting into the person's private business, and just like it becomes this story rather than actually this person needed help, and maybe these were the signs we could look for so that the next person that's showing these signs, we could help them instead of it getting to that place. Right, so the conversation gets lost if we don't know how to report on it. So I always encourage people who are listening to go to reportingonsuicide.org, because it gives guidelines on how to safely report on suicide. We want people to also learn mental health first aid. So basically how to talk to someone who's going through emotional distress. And that way we have a more community-oriented approach where a person may not need to be hospitalized if they're getting the support right there in the community.
Yeah. Well, okay, I really do wish you success with that particular initiative, because I think it's definitely a needed one. And to kind of segue into something along the lines of advocacy, but maybe for international students in terms of areas that they can possibly get into or study, or things that are out there that they may not even know about, if they have that need to get into advocacy. Can you share some idea as to what are some of these things that students can get involved in, what majors they can do, or all of the other opportunities that are out there that gives them that opportunity to do advocacy work?
Yeah. So I think advocacy is big in the Caribbean. And the reason is because we are in, underdeveloped countries a lot of the times, where a lot of change needs to happen. In order for change to happen, we need advocacy. We need people who are willing to speak up about different issues. And Caribbean people are loud and proud. We're used to speaking up about things. We don't usually hide a lot. If we have something to say, we say it. And so from very young in school, we learn how to do public speaking and all of that. We lead assemblies, we do all the things. So advocacy is a really good area to go into, but there are many ways to get into it. So for example, some of the people that I've worked with in advocacy are like medical doctors, people who have degrees in policy. And policy is a huge area again, because policy shapes laws, right? And that shapes society in a lot of ways. So getting degrees in things related to policy, public health is another really good area for the Caribbean, because our health systems are not always up to par, right? So getting degrees in public health, I would really encourage, because it's STEM related, but it's also something that you can easily connect to as a Caribbean person, just understanding how climate change affects us on a health perspective, and all of these things. So I would say policy, degrees in policy, and advocacy, degrees in public health, especially. And of course, I'm always going to encourage people to do social work because it is so vast and wide in terms of what you can do with the degree. I'm always going to encourage that. But the skills that come with advocacy are things that I think Caribbean people already have. So I actually think that any degree could lead into advocacy if you care about change. So if you're a person who really cares about change and you want to be a voice in some way for creating change on whatever subject you're passionate about, even if it's math, right? If you're passionate about more girls getting into math, you could end up getting a degree in math and then being an advocate for that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I understand that perspective, and I think that's a good way to look at it because sometimes we think that, doing a particular degree, we're kind of limited to just staying in your lane and just kind of sticking to the bare bones of what that degree is about. But I think what you're basically saying is beyond the degree, you can find ways to advocate so that people can be helped and others can move along as you would see it fit, to help them. So I think that's a good a good way to put it. I like that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about just because I think a lot of people now are kind of indifferent about schooling. We're growing up in the influencer world now, so everyone wants to, be able to be a content creator and all of that. And it's great and it's nice, but that doesn't mean that a degree can't help you with that. And I think people are often ask the question, well, why do I need to go to school if what I want to do doesn't need a degree? It may not need a degree, but the expertise that you gain could enhance your content.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the things that we need to be thinking about. How can I educate myself to give me an edge in whatever I want to do? Yeah.
I think sometimes people perceive going to university or education or higher learning as something that's kind of for a certain group of people, maybe like academics or people who have this specific type of interest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's so many things that you learn outside of just the particular degree that you're doing that just makes you a better person in general and also makes you more of a conscientious citizen. Yeah. And, just knowing things makes you, it puts you in a better position to make better decisions. As you said, it puts you in a better position to understand who needs help and how you can help them. So what would you say about that? Because I think sometimes, especially now, you hear people saying things like, well, this person didn't go to school, but they're the richest person in the world, or they didn't go to college and they're successful. But obviously, that doesn't happen to the majority of people that don't go to school. So what would be your encouragement to people who are like, making that decision now and they're kind of leaning towards, I don't really need to go to university. That's a waste of time.
So my first rebuttal in terms of the argument of like, okay, this person, let's say, I don't know, Jeff Bezos. I don't know if he went to school, but people said that about Steve
Jobs.
Steve Jobs didn't go to school, right? My first thought is, but who were they connected to and who were they around? Who was in their proximity? Because even if they didn't go to school, they may have known people who did.
Yeah.
Or they may have known people who had access to money and funding and all of that.
And just to butt in, it's more likely that the engineers and the people that developed all of their stuff, they went to school.
Exactly. The people who work for them, yeah, right? You still need those degrees, right? So yes, you can have an innovative brain and all of that and be a person who's like, school is not for me, but who do you have around you that's going to get you to the next level? Because if you don't live in a place where there is a lot of who you want to be, right? Let's say you want to be the next Jeff Bezos. How many people around you do you know that are doing anything like that? If you don't have that around you, education is a great way to maybe get you into those rooms. Because just through education, I didn't even know that I would have ever done advocacy, for example, but I got training in advocacy during my degree program in psychology. I took a class, it was a policy research class, and we had to create a policy brief, and then we had to present it at a conference. and then you meet policymakers when you do these events, and that was through schooling.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, why am I doing this? I'm not gonna be doing advocacy. I don't like public speaking, right? That was my thought, but that training is helping me know, and I didn't know where it would take me. So we think we know everything, you know. When you're young, you think you know everything, but you never know where life is going to take you. So if there's an opportunity to get to study, especially if you're going to get a scholarship, take it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you're talking to a young person in the Caribbean, because I think one of the greatest challenges to people in the Caribbean and around the world, and you just mentioned scholarships, and you're basically alluding to the fact that funding is an issue. So in the work that you've done, or things that you know based on your interactions with the education system, are there any particular directions you would tell people to look in terms of how to fund their education and not giving up on that dream? Because I know sometimes it can seem pretty difficult because it is expensive. I mean, American students pay for their education. It's not like they're just walking through school for free, right? So, what would you tell that young person who's sitting in the Caribbean? They have the potential, they have the drive, but they don't have the money.
So one of the first things we go to in the Caribbean is loans, right? Going to the bank, asking for a loan. However, that doesn't always work because sometimes you need to have assets, or your family needs to have assets that, you know, they're going to put against the loan and see if you'll be able to pay back the loan and all of those things. I mean, if that doesn't work, to me, the next best things is finding programs like yours, right? So Global Ed does a lot of work around helping people understand what scholarships are out there for international students. And I think programs like that are really, really needed. I think when I stumbled upon Global Ed, I'd never seen anything like it before, especially not something geared towards Caribbean students, international students, and it's needed. You now have content creators who are putting up information online about scholarships. This is where you can go to find scholarships, right? You can find that information on YouTube, but then to have a service like yours where people can go and actually talk to someone to find out what's available, that's what I would encourage people to do, because funding is a huge issue and it's not that easy to get a loan.
No, it isn't. And I think sometimes what happens is that if you don't ask questions, you really don't know of the opportunities that are out there. Because what we've realized when we do our research is, and right now we're trying to compile, like a bunch of different lists of where students can get funding from. And we've realized that there's a lot of different funding just based on like particular groups of people. So let's say you're into science specifically, there might be just some specific funding for females in science, or females doing aerospace engineering or something like that. But you would never know until you ask, or you reach out to people like us who do what we do. We try to compile that information and share it with people. And also what we've seen is people, like I spoke to a young lady who she first took the step of coming to study without having secured, the funding. And then while she was here, she was able to get scholarships while she was at the university. And she used those scholarships to get her first degree. And then she was sponsored, or, they paid for her to do her master's degree. And now she's completing her PhD. So sometimes people don't know that you kind of have to take that first step. You have to be a little risk, like you have to be able to take some risk, because it is a scary venture. I won't be flippant about it, but ultimately there are opportunities out there, and just sitting back and saying, you know what, I can't do it because my parents don't have the money or whatever, it really doesn't help you. And I think sometimes we need to kind of like tell people, hey, you need to be a little more interested in exploring, because there are opportunities out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, discovering Global Ed showed me that, because we know about some of the bigger scholarships like Chevening and things like that. Mm-hmm. We know about that. We see the government posting about it all the time. But when you appeared in our workshop last year for career coaching, And a lot of the scholarships that you exposed our audience to, I had never heard of these things, so it's really good work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And obviously, the team, we try our best and we are looking to expand. And hopefully, we'll have some more accessible information related to scholarships and funding, because we've identified that as a huge stumbling block for students. It's not that we don't have the potential or the educational talent or the drive or the ability, but funding is a major issue for international students. So we are going to be working on that. So to move the conversation along, I think the work that you're doing, it's impressive. You've also been working with other Caribbean students to kind of like of different levels of education.
Yeah.
To help them with their own achievements. So how has that been going? And what's new? What's going on? What's the vibe with KariCope right now?
So as far as students that we would have helped, so we would have wrapped up a group coaching that we had last year. And from that, we now have individual people that we work with where we provide career coaching. So if you're looking for, let's say, a career transition, or you're trying to figure out what direction to go in, maybe you're a young person trying to figure out your interests, we help with that as well through our individual career coaching services. We're still providing our mental health coaching services. And, the newest thing we're doing is the advocacy work. And that has really given us an opportunity to represent Grenada in a whole different way. So, for example, last November, we went to the International Association for Suicide Prevention's Pan-American Conference. And we had people from St. Lucia. I had a colleague who is from KariCope, who I had never met in person, even though we were working together for years under KariCope. We met in person through being able to go to that conference. So just getting to be able to connect with global partners through the advocacy work, that has been wonderful.
Okay. All right. And how can people get in contact with you, or how can they engage with your programs?
So people can reach us at KariCopeWellness.org, or they can reach us on Instagram at kari.cope, Kari.cope. Find us on Instagram, find us on Facebook, KariCope Wellness Alliance. That's pretty much where we are. And we have a YouTube channel as well with maybe past workshops that we've done. We do like wellness workshops free. We do suicide prevention workshops as well. The last one was in December of last year, and people told us you need to do this quarterly. So that's something that we're trying to work on, to do it more often, because especially the men in the group are telling us we need more of this.
Okay. And do you also work along with organizations? So can an organization bring you in to do maybe a clinic or some wellness course or something?
Yeah, so we do suicide prevention trainings for organizations. So for example, if your organization comes in contact with, let's say, young people who may be dealing with suicidal thoughts, and you want your employees to know how to refer them and help them and keep them safe, we do workshops around that to get everyone equipped. We do conflict resolution. We do different types of workshops that would help organizations work better as a team, because we have to really develop our human resources in the Caribbean, because we deal with a lot. I think even just the disasters that we deal with can take a huge toll on our mental health. And sometimes having to go back to work after these events is hard enough. So we do those types of workshops to help with sensitivity training to support the workforce in that way.
Okay. All right. So are there any other final thoughts or anything else? Because I have a fun question to ask you. But before we get to the fun part, I just want to wrap up the serious questions first.
Final thoughts is just really a thank you for having me. I think you're doing really good work. It's great to be able to be in this space in person to do this, and keep up the good work. Keep up the good work that you're doing, because I've even referred people to you, and one person came back to me and said, you gave them a nice list of schools and scholarships to look into. And so now they're looking into it after being rejected for bigger scholarships outside of this. So you're doing great work, and I want to encourage you to keep going.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know you might be thinking I'm the one that's doing all the work, but I do have a team behind me, So Alvon and my brother, they both help with the effort. So it's not just me. But we thank you very much for recognizing that, what we do is needed and there's a lot of room for growth and there's a lot of ways that we can help students. So we really look forward to keeping on doing that. So now to the fun part. So I happened to come across, was it a video or a picture of you doing some like suspension thing and I was like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
So what is that? What was that? Is that like you working in a circus or something? What's going on there?
So what you saw is part of my self-care. So anything movement related is usually what helps me to cope when life gets stressful. So it's really important for me to keep moving. So growing up in Grenada, dance is big. You learn to dance from very young in Grenada. So I kept that with me all the way. And then I left dance for a while. But now I'm doing aerial silk. So it's a type of circusy, gymnast related kind of thing. But it's a lot of fun. It's anaerobic exercise. A lot of upper body strength is needed. You do a lot of stunts, flipping in the air attached to this suspended fabric and all of that. So it helps me to conquer fears. When I leave, I feel very empowered. And sometimes people forget that there's so much healing that can come from movement. It's not just about always talking it through, but sometimes you need to get negative energy out through movement. So that's what I do.
Oh, okay. Am I invited to?
I mean, I'm sure there are studios all over. I would encourage you to try it. I would encourage anyone to try it.
Seems scary, but we'll see.
It is. But when you do things that are scary, you feel more confident after that. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for letting us in on that secret. And thank you very much for the conversation today. I think, obviously, as I said before, the work that you're doing is amazing. And I wish you all the best with your advocacy and all the changes that you're looking to make with your organization. We really do wish you the best.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me again.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us. I was speaking with Desarie Nicholas. She is the founder of KariCope Wellness, and she is doing great work. And I want to thank her very much for being here and sharing this conversation with me. For those of you who are wanting to find out more about Global Ed Recruiting, reach us on our email address at globaledrecruitingagency.com or send us a message on Instagram at Global Ed Recruiting or Facebook also, Global Ed Recruiting. And we look forward to seeing you sometime in the future. So until next time, have a good one.